Once you've fit your handle, if for any reason the thumb turn is stiff and won't push and turn, then there's something that's not aligned properly within the handle, and that's not correct. Also, if you try and lift the handle and the motor won't fully turn,
door locked,
but nothing is happening because the motor can't actually turn itself, that's because something is not turning inside here. So there's a few things that we can do to try and fix that. Most issues when installing the Origin Smart stem from the same place. It typically comes from the thumb turn and the cylinder bar, and whether if there's anything misaligned there, then the motor can't turn it or the thumb turn is stiff. Now, all of those things can be fixed with about 5 different things we can look at. So we're going to go through them in this video, each one individually, so you can test that and see if it improves the installation of the Origin Smart. If then for any reason it's still not working after trying all of these methods, there may be something wrong with the lock in the door, or there may be something else. So please get in touch and we can try and work on it from there. But hopefully these solutions work for you. So one thing we want to do is just make sure that you've got the correct cam bar in here. If this cam bar is slightly too long, then when you're pushing that thumb turn in, it's not able to fully push in because the cam bar is stopping it. So just always make sure you've got the right one. In the installation video, shows you how to measure it. But if I pull this door slightly like this, you can see that this cam bar is pretty much level with the back plate. And that's where roughly you want it to be. Obviously there's 3 different cam bars to choose from, so just make sure you measure your door. If it's sticking quite a bit further outside of this back plate, you may need to try the cam bar size down from this one. So sometimes when you lock the door, if it's struggling to lock itself, or when you try and push the thumb turn in, it's not popping back out, then sometimes that's because of this cylinder screw.
door locked,
So it sounds like the motor was taking a bit longer. When I try and unlock it with the thumb turn, it's a bit stiffer and it's not popping out as nicely. It's a bit more difficult. Now, this is because this screw is too tight, and what it's doing is it's pulling the cylinder inside slightly off center. So if I just loosen that just half a turn, it just gives it enough room. So now when we should do it,
door locked,
so that locks a lot easier, and to unlock it, it's made that thumb turn a lot slicker to use with no effort. So sometimes just undoing this as a half turn actually gives it the movement it needs. Okay, if the thumb turn's still stiff and it's not operating the lock, the next thing to try is we're going to take the handle off fully. We're going to pull the cable out. We're going to loosen the screws on the back plate. When we're making sure the back plate is aligned, obviously we want to make sure that it's aligned with the side of the door, but also what we want to make sure is that the cylinder in this hole is centered and you can see the whole thing. So if anything is actually fouling on the sides or anything, that might be what's causing the thumb turn to stick. So that's why sometimes when we put the jig back on, that we can push that in and that makes sure that it's centered, but you can still play with the alignment of the back plate slightly as well. So sometimes even just a few millimeters either way can allow it to sit on a lot nicer and make the thumb turn push in a lot easier. So every time we take the internal handle off, we want to make sure that we reset the cam in here, just to make sure that each time it knows which is the right position to be locked. So you can push your little screwdriver in, and push the small brass pin down in here, and then twist the bar, and then that'll just reset the cylinder. So make sure we do that every time we push that in. So when we're resetting the cylinder bar to make sure it's pointing upwards, we always want to make sure we reset the thumb turn here as well. So make sure that we take it so those arrows point upwards, just so that every time we reset it, it's back in the default position and can start properly again. So once we've retightened all of those screws, sometimes this just takes a few different adjustments. You might have to try it a few different times to make sure that it's lined up nicely. And then we can put the handle back on. what we're trying to do is make sure that this bar is centered in the hole here. So this one again may not work very well, we may need to try it again. So I'm going to put this back on. So if we take the handle back off, we can then look at what's potentially causing the problem. One thing is potentially if that cable is pushing on the back plate here, that may be causing the handle to push off in the middle and the mechanism not to be able to engage properly. So one thing that we're going to do is when we fit it, we want to try and make sure that that cable is still going up and around the thumb turn, but is pushed down enough that it's not going to foul on the top of this. Now, if you have space in your handle in the hole here, you can push some of the cable back into the door, but some doors have a small prep hole here, and therefore you can't do this. Sometimes what we like to do is enlarge that prep hole just to give us a bit more room to play with the cable. But if you can't do that, just make sure that when you're putting the handle on, you're wrapping the cable around the thumb turn and push down with your finger a bit so that it's not engaging properly onto the back plate. So when you push the handle on, that one's not got it, push that on, it should be able to push flat. So that's one thing you can try. Make sure, put your screws back in, try the handle again. Once you've actually set it up once, you can try it without the batteries in, but that's one thing to check as well. Now, sometimes you have 3 adjustable screw fixing positions here. Some locks will use 2, some locks will use 3. The majority will all use the bottom one, but then it may use the bottom in the middle or the bottom and the top, or potentially have an option for all 3. Now, the only thing to be aware of here is if it's the bottom and the middle screw and there's nothing holding the top on, then you can see here that there can be a little bit of flex in the back plate. Now, that can cause some issues when installing because the handle might not be fully sat on the lock. So I'm going to show you what that looks like and then what to do about it. Now, when you install the handle, we can see that this one, because it only had 2 bottom screws, when we look at it from a side, we can see that there's daylight between the top here. Now, when you do that, if you do that whilst you're installing and you're trying to get it working, sometimes it actually makes the thumb turn skip and not actually turn the bar with the motor when you lift the handle from the outside, because there's actually a gap here and it's creating a bit of a gap between this and the bar. So one thing we want to do is just when you're installing it, because I'll show you how we attach it, but sometimes you don't want to fully attach it to the door because we're going to have to drill a hole into the door. We want to make sure it's working properly first. So when you install it, one thing to do is just when you're testing it, push it, use your fingers, push it tight so it's flat, and make sure we can get it working nicely with the motor and everything. Once you're comfortable with that, we're going to take the handle back off and then we're going to put a screw in to fix that in, and it'll stop it having any problems moving forward. So once you've got everything aligned and you're happy with it and you're happy with the alignment of the back plate, the handle's going on nicely, the thumb turn's working, then you can take this screw that comes in the box. It's a self-tapping screw, and then you can put that in this top hole here. So if we then drill that into the top, that will then hold the top of the back plate to the door, and the handle will sit flush with the door, and then you shouldn't get any issues. So one thing you can do as a final check just to get it working nice and smoothly is we can take the batteries out, and we can only do this once we've actually already used the handle once so it knows which direction it's going to be in, so it's not in its default reset mode. Take the handles out, and then what we can do is we can manually lock the door. So lift the handle, actually lock the door manually with the thumb turn, and then unlock it manually, lock it manually, and unlock it. Now you can do this over and over, but what it might do is just help align it and get it working nicely inside, making sure that thumb turn's really easy to twist. So you should be able to twist it and easily do it with not much force at all. Once we're happy with that, we can pop the batteries back in.
Door locked.
lift the handle, make sure it locks correctly, make sure it's easy to unlock it, and we're good to go. So once we've looked at the 3 different things, or 4, so with the screw, the cylinder screw, making sure you've got the right size cam bar in here, making sure the back plate's aligned properly and using the jig here, and then also making sure that the cable's not pushing on the back plate so that the handle is nice and flush against the door, then the thumb turn should work quite nicely and you should be able to
Door locked.
lift the handle that'll lock the door. The thumb turn should be easy to push and twist with barely any force at all, and if it's stiffer than that, then something's not quite aligned properly. If you're still having issues, then it may be that there's something wrong with the lock in the door may be misaligned, it may not be a compatible lock for the Origin Smart. So there's a variety of things that it still may be. So if that's the case, please contact us. We can work with you to see what can be done. You may need professional installation. We do recommend this just to make sure that somebody can see if there's any issues with the lock to make sure it's installed properly. So this is still an option for you as well. So get in touch with us and we'll do our best to help.